The pirates sent one boat for her alone, because those were the rules, and Sana Reeve climbed the side of the Kestrel with 12 lives in her satchel and the oldest question of her trade waiting at the top. Whether today's captain was a merchant or a butcher, because the trade only worked on merchants, and you never found out which until you were already aboard. She came over the rail into a wall of armed silence. 40 of the iron tide ranged along the deck to look at what had been rowed out to them. A small woman past 50 in an unarmed grey coat, carrying paper, ink, a strongbox key, and nothing else. That was the trade too. An intermediary carries no weapon, tells no lie, and serves no side. The coat says so, and the coat is known from the Bone Shore to the Lantern Coast. And the whole strange ancient mechanism of ransom, the one commerce in the world conducted between enemies in good faith, balances on everyone aboard believing it. The famous grey coat, said the man waiting at the mast. Captain Farrow of the Kestrel was younger than she'd expected, black-bearded with quick-weighing eyes, and she catalogued it with relief, ledgers under his arm. Butchers don't bring ledgers. You're smaller than the stories. The stories are about the coat, Sana said. I just carry it. You hold 12 off the merchantman Dorrit's Pride, her master, 10 crew, 1 clerk. The family's consortium in Greywick engaged me at the standard fee. I'm empowered to settle and pay today. She looked at him level. Shall we do this properly, Captain? Table, witnesses, terms in writing. You strike me as a man who does things properly. Farrow smiled slowly, and the smile decided her question of the rail. Merchant, thank the tides. A table, he agreed. But understand what you've climbed into, Coat. It's not as simple as 12 and a price. You'll see why shortly. Sana had been buying people back from pirates for 26 years, and in 26 years she had learned that nothing said at a rail before the table meant anything except that sentence. That sentence, in her long experience, always meant everything. They set the table under the quarterdeck in the open, before the crew, iron-tied custom, because a ransom belonged to every man's share, and every man was owed the watching of it, and Sana laid out her papers and began the liturgy of her trade. Terms first, then price, she said. The terms don't move. 1, I see all 12 alive and walking before an offer leaves my mouth. 2, what I agree my principals honor, my seal binds them, that's what the fee buys. 3, she said it as she had said it 1,000 times, flat and total, I do not lie at this table. Not to you, not for my principles, not by a hair. Ask the coast. In 26 years no captain has caught me in a falsehood because there has never been one to catch. That's not virtue, Captain. It's the tool. It's the only reason your kind lets my kind climb aboard. And omissions? Farrow asked. Idly. He was leafing his own ledger, not looking at her, which is when the sharp ones always ask the real questions. An intermediary answers what is asked, Sana said, and had said 1,000 times, and it came out today, for reasons she would understand within the hour, half a beat slower than usual. Said Farrow, and turned a page. The captives came up from the hold blinking into the light, and Sana walked the line of them the way she always did, saying the small steadying things, noting hurts and names. The Dorrit's Pride's master, grey and glaring, 10 sailors, frightened and whole, and at the line's end the clerk. A young woman, 20 perhaps, ink-stained fingers, salt-ruined clothes, eyes down, doing frightened clerk perfectly. The master of the Dorrit's Pride used his moment in the line the way frightened important men always did, complaining the route, the luck, the insurers, and one complaint snagged in Sana's ear and stayed there. We shouldn't even have been in these waters, he said bitterly. I've run the Southern Passage 9 years. The northern route was a late change, a chartering condition, extra coin from a freight agent in Astra to carry general cargo the long way, and I took it, tides forgive me, because the coin was too good. He shook his grey head at his own ruin. Too good, there's a lesson. There is, Sana agreed, and wrote route purchased in the private shorthand, and felt the day's temperature drop another degree. Ships get taken on routes, and this ship's route had been bought, by coin too good, 3 weeks before the iron tide happened to be waiting on it. Doing it, that was the word Sana's 26 years supplied, unbidden, and she hated it immediately. Because the details were wrong if you had spent a lifetime reading people across tables. Frightened clerks watched the captain, the source of harm. This one watched the exits and the boats, assessing, not fearing. Her hands were ink-stained, yes, but the calluses were wrong. Riding calluses, fencing calluses, hands that had held reins and foils before they held pens. And when Sana asked the line, gently, name and home port for my record, The clerk said Jory, out of Astra, with the vowels perfectly flattened, too perfectly. Vowels that had been trained out of something, and the something underneath was old money, warm stone, the accent of the great harbour families. Sana wrote Jory, clerk, Astra in her book, and with it in the private shorthand no soul had ever read 26 years of alarm in one small mark. Because she was now nearly certain, just found a lion in the sheep line, somebody's hidden heir, travelling incognito as ship's paper. And if she was right, then everyone at this table was standing on a powder keg, and only Sana knew it was lit. Custom gave the intermediary a private quarter-hour with the captives, to take grievances, list hurts, carry words to families, and Sana used hers, below decks, to sit on a cargo bale opposite the clerk who was not a clerk, and speak too quietly for the guard at the hatch. "Let's be quick," Sana said. "Your ink is on your fingers but not under your nails. A working clerk's nails are black to the moon. You watch doors, not captors. Your vowels are excellent, and 1 word in 40 betrays the coast you trained them off of. And when the master of your ship looks at you, child, he looks the way men look at cargo they were paid extra to carry and dearly wish they hadn't taken aboard." She let that land. "I don't need your name. In fact, I need to not have it. Hold that thought. We'll come back to it. I need to know one thing only. Is there anyone anywhere who profits if you don't come home?" The girl held the frightened clerk face for 3 full seconds, which was well done, and then folded it away like the tool it was, which was better done, and looked at Sana with the level, assessing eyes underneath. "You're the one they call the coat," she said, "the one who can't lie. If I tell you what I am, what do you do with it at that table?" "Nothing unless asked," Sana said. "An intermediary answers what is asked. No one asks who a clerk is. I buy 12 sailors at sailors' prices and you walk down the gangway as paperwork. That's the play, and it's a good one, and it only has one flaw." "Which is?" "That I didn't find you by genius, girl. I found you in a quarter-hour with lifetime habits, which means anyone else looking has found you too, and someone paid this ship's master to route you, and ships get taken on routes, and I have spent 26 years watching coincidences of exactly that shape turn out to be purchases." Sana stood and straightened the grey coat, and was suddenly, thoroughly, coldly certain of the day ahead in the way of old practitioners and old sailors. "If we're lucky, I'm a suspicious old woman and you're home by the new moon. If we're not, someone is already rowing out here. Answer my one question: who profits?" The girl was quiet a moment. "My uncle," she said at last, very evenly, in a voice rehearsing a fact it had lived beside a long time. "If I die before my majority, the succession crosses to his line. I'm at sea because my mother thought a year of salt and false papers was safer than our own house." She looked up. "She may have been wrong." "She may have been," Sana said. "Eat something. Whatever happens at that table today, it will happen fast, and it will turn on details, and one of the details is going to be you standing up straight at the right moment if I call for you. Wait for my exact words. You'll know them because they'll be the last thing anyone expects the woman who answers what is asked to say." The haggle itself was almost a pleasure, the way it always was with merchants. Pharaoh opened high with a straight face, the cargo lost, the trouble taken, the running costs of hospitality, and Sana took his number apart line by line without ever calling it dishonest. The cargo was insured and both of them knew it. Hospitality at salt pork rates came cheaper than his arithmetic, and the Greywick family's purse had a true ceiling which she named exactly, because it was true and because naming true ceilings was the coat's whole authority. They landed inside an hour, a whisker under her mandate. 12 lives for a number both sides could call fair in front of their principals, and Pharaoh sat back looking like a man who had enjoyed his morning. "You're what they say," he admitted. "It's a clean trade, doing it with someone who can't lie. Restful. I'd sign now, Coat. I'd have signed 10 minutes ago, except..." He looked past her, out over the rail at the grey water of the anchorage, at something Sana had been aboard 3 hours without knowing was coming. "Except I told you it wasn't simple, and here comes the reason. We had a second inquiry 2 days ago about this same catch. And the second buyer asked for a seat at any table before I closed. In fairness, and the tide is fair, whatever the coasts say, I gave my word he'd have it." A boat was pulling across the anchorage, one passenger, dark-coated, sitting very straight. "A second buyer," Sana said, "for a merchant crew. It made no commercial sense, and she said so. Nobody outbids families for their own people, Captain. There's no margin in ransomed sailors. What does he say he wants?" "That's the interesting part," said Pharaoh. "He wants one, just the one. His quick eyes came back to her, weighing, "He wants the clerk." The man who came over the rail was called Slate, or offered the name Slate the way you offer a coat check token, one perfectly ordinary syllable that existed to be handed back later, and Sana knew his profession before his boots touched the deck, because in 26 years around tables she had met perhaps 5 of him, and each one had cost somebody everything. Not a buyer, a closer, the kind of man great houses keep off their books entirely and pay through 3 cutouts, sent when a piece of business must not merely be done but be deniable forever after. He was polite to Pharaoh, correct with the crew, and he looked at Sana's grey coat for exactly 1 flat second, the way a locksmith looks at a lock. "Captain, Madam Intermediary." He took the 3rd chair unhurried. "My principal's interest is narrow. The young person your manifest lists as ship's clerk travelled under false papers. She is in fact party to a significant private debt, a family matter of the kind families prefer settled quietly. I'm instructed to settle it. I will pay for that one person delivered to my boat the full sum this table just agreed for all 12. He let the number sit on the deck where 40 shareholding pirates could hear it. "The other 11 I've no interest in. The coat may have them at whatever price stands. Everyone profits. One matter of paperwork changes hands." The crew murmured like weather. Pharaoh's face did nothing at all, which meant it was doing everything, and Sana sat very still inside 26 years of discipline and watched the whole shape of the day assemble itself in the air in front of her. She made him work for it first, because rushing to the kill tells a man like Slate exactly what you know. "A family matter," she repeated mildly, pen poised over her book like a woman merely keeping minutes. "Forgive the trade's habits, sir. I document everything. It's what the fee buys. Your principal holds this debt in writing. Notes of hand, a court's paper." "Privately held," Slate said, "as family debts are." "Of course, and the sum of the debt?" "Substantial." "More substantial than 12 lives, apparently," Sana observed to her book, "since that's the price you've put on collecting it." She let the arithmetic sit 1 beat for the 40 listeners. "A curious debt that costs more to collect than it could plausibly be worth, but I interrupt. Captain, the gentleman's coin is presumably good." "His coin is aboard and it's good," Pharaoh said. His eyes were moving between them now, weather-eyed, a man watching 2 currents converge on his hull. "And my word to hear him stands. But the coat's terms were struck first, so I'll hear her too. You've the floor, madam, bid or object." "I'll do a 3rd thing," Sana said, "in a moment. First, since we are all merchants here except perhaps one of us, I'd like the deck to notice what was just offered. Not a premium, a pattern. The gentleman wants one soul cut out of a herd unwitnessed at any price, with the herd itself thrown back at a discount to sweeten the cutting. I've sat at 400 tables, Captain. Cargo is bought like cargo. Debts are bought like debts." She looked up from the book at last, straight at Slate, pleasant as a knitting needle. "Only one thing on this earth is ever bought like that." "And what would that be?" Slate asked, because the table's rhythm forced him to. "Silence," said Sana. "Now, before anyone bids, I'd like to ask the gentleman 3 questions. He's asked this table to change a soul from one column to another. In my trade, that's earned 3 questions. Captain." A closer paying a 12-life price for one false-papered clerk, framing it as debt. There was no debt. There was an heir off her family's ground for the first time in her guarded life, and somewhere back on the warm stone coasts there was a person, an uncle, a cousin, a rival branch. Succession had a short list of shapes for whom this girl's quiet death at sea, at pirate hands, in deniable circumstances no investigator could ever walk back past 3 cutouts, was worth any sum on earth. The Kestrel hadn't caught a clerk, it had caught an inheritance, and Slate had come to make sure it never went home. Pharaoh spread a hand, "Proceed." Slate inclined his head politely, a man with nothing to hide and a boat waiting. "First question," Sana said. "The debt you're settling, is the debtor to be alive when you deliver her to your principal?" "My instructions concern delivery to my boat," Slate said smoothly. "What follows is my principal's family business." "Noted. Second question, your principal's name?" "Confidential, as the captain would expect in a private matter." "Also noted." Sana turned a page in her book, unhurried, and felt the deck's 40 listeners lean in behind her, and asked the 3rd question, looking not at Slate but at Pharaoh, because the 3rd question was never for the man being asked. "3rd question." When she's found, and she will be found, drowned or vanished, it makes no difference. And when the people who love her spend what such people spend to learn how she died at sea in the exact week the iron tide held her, who does your principal intend to be holding the story, Captain? Him, behind his 3 cutouts and his one-syllable man here. Or you? The deck went quiet in a new way. Careful, Coat, Slate said, still pleasant. You're speculating. Your famous table rule should worry about that. It does, Sana agreed, which is why I'm about to stop speculating. And here was the moment, arrived exactly as she had felt it assembling, the moment her whole long career had bent toward without her knowing, the moment the rule she'd recited 1,000 times came due in full. Because she could win crooked or lose straight or do the third thing. Crooked, invent a counter-story, bluff a bigger purse, buy the girl under falsehood and be caught inside a season and end the Coat forever, hers and every intermediary's after her. The trade ran on the Coat being incapable of that. Straight and silent, bid her true ceiling, be trivially outbid by a purse built for murder, and row 11 souls home while the 12th went over the far rail in the night. Or the third thing. The thing that felt, right up until she did it, like breaking her deepest confidence, and was actually, she understood as she stood up, the only whole version of the truth-telling she'd practiced her entire life in halves. An intermediary answers what is asked. For 26 years she had hidden behind that sentence's second clause. The rule was never answer what is asked. The rule was the table gets the truth it needs, and this table was about to trade a life on a lie of omission, half of it hers. Captain Pharaoh, Sana said, before any bid is taken, there is a material fact this table lacks, and I hold it, and withholding it while money changes hands would make my seal a party to fraud. I invoke full disclosure. Ask me who the clerk is. Slate moved just his eyes, but they moved first to the girl and then to the rail and then to Sana, fast, recalculating, and that flicker was worth more than a confession. Who, said Pharaoh slowly, is the clerk? Stand up, child, Sana said, not unkindly to the line of captives. It's done either way now. Better it's done in daylight, on the record, in front of 40 witnesses. That's the safest room you've stood in since they took your ship. Trust an old woman, the daylight is the shield. And the clerk, who was not a clerk, stood up out of the sheep line with her chin coming level and her trained, flat vowels falling away like a dropped coat, and said, in the warm stone accent of the great families, My name is Jorna Verates. My uncle sent this man to buy my death, and I will remember every face on this deck according to what it does in the next 10 minutes. The name went through the Kestrel's crew like a swell under the hull, because there was not a sailor on any coast who did not know it. Verates, Consortium, one of the 5 families whose ledgers moved the world's grain and whose displeasure moved its fleets. Now, Captain, Sana said into the roll of it while every arithmetic on deck was still tumbling, let's reprice the gentleman's offer with the material fact on the table. He asks you to hand a Verates heir to a man with no name, on a boat with no colors, for family business he won't describe, on behalf of a principal he won't identify. If she vanishes, his principal is 3 cutouts away, and you are 0. The iron tide held her, the iron tide sold her, the iron tide hangs for her in every port ballad, in every consortium ledger, in the warfleet arithmetic of a family that can afford any revenge it can imagine. He isn't paying you a 12-life price for one clerk, Pharaoh. He's paying you to stand between his principal and House Verates forever. Price that. Alternatively, she went on, before Slate's opening mouth could find its footing, the Coat's offer revised in daylight, the agreed sum for the 11 paid today. And for the heir ransomed alive, whole and publicly, through a neutral intermediary of record, at a figure her family will meet without blinking, with the Kestrel's conduct entered in my ledger as correct throughout. Which it has been, Captain. I'll write what's true, I always do, ask the coast. One road ends with the tide richer, and owed a debt of conduct by the most vengeful house on the water. The other ends with you as the hired glove of a man whose name you'll never even have had. You're a merchant, Pharaoh, I watched you be one all morning. Price it. Slate tried. He was good and he tried, and his first try was the one Sana had been braced for since she stood up, because it was the move his whole profession existed to make. Then my principal's interest broadens, Slate said, unruffled, recalculating in the open with a kind of terrible administrative calm. New offer, Captain, the full sum previously named for all 12. The entire ketch, crew and clerk together, delivered to my boats by nightfall. Your ship sails away from this anchorage having never held anyone of consequence, holding nothing but profit. Whatever outcomes concern the coat's imagination, they occur far from your log and your name. No Varati's grievance can find a ship that sold a full catch of ordinary sailors to an ordinary buyer. I've just bought your deniability for you, Captain, at my principal's expense. It's the safest coin you'll ever take. And there it was, the closer's true shape, out in the daylight at last, and Sana heard the deck hear it. 11 sailors, whose only crime was witnessing, repriced in one smooth sentence as things to be disappeared alongside the girl. The herd bought to erase the cutting. Count what he just did, Sana said quietly into the silence before Pharaoh could speak. 10 minutes ago, 11 of those souls were worthless to him, his word no interest. The moment the truth stood up, they became worth the same fortune as the air. Ask yourselves what changed, lads, not their labor, not their ransom, only what they saw. She turned back to Pharaoh and put the last piece on the table with the flat care of a woman laying down a loaded thing. And Captain, do the arithmetic one step further, because your 40 are standing in it. Today his principal buys the witnesses on the ship. Every man on this deck watched the same thing they watched. When has silence ever stayed bought at the waterline? The deck's murmur this time had iron filings in it, and Slate heard the change. And for the first time since his boots had touched the Kestrel, the one-syllable man said nothing at all, because there was no next offer that did not require bidding on 40 armed shareholders, and both of them knew it. His remaining tries were smaller after that, the debt restated, the sum raised once more, a new note of quiet menace regarding principals who did not accept disappointment, and it was sand through fingers, because his entire play had been built for a table that didn't know, and Sana had detonated the knowing in front of 40 shareholders whose necks were suddenly in the price. Pirates will vote for gold over safety often enough. They will never vote for someone else's gold over their own necks. The tide thanks you for your inquiry, Pharaoh said at last, formally, with the deck solid behind his voice. It's declined, you'll want your boat, the tide's turning. And then, as Slate rose, correct and unhurried to the end, one more thing to carry home. The Kestrel's log for today will record everyone at this table, and the coat's ledger the same, and both of us keep our records where burning them is hard. If the young lady meets any weather ever that her family finds unconvincing, the first names read out will be your principal's shortlist. Tell your uncle who doesn't exist that the iron tide said so. Slate looked once more at Sana, the locksmith look again, revising upward what the lock had cost him, and offered her a small nod of purely professional acknowledgement, the guild courtesy of one closer to another whose clothes had been better, and went over the side and out of the story, back to the coasts, carrying the worst cargo in his trade, a failure with witnesses. The rest was paperwork, which is how the best days in Sana's trade always ended. 11 souls of the Dorrit's pride went down into her boat by afternoon, paid and signed. Jorna Varatis remained aboard the Kestrel 9 further days, guarded now like the treasury she had turned out to be, and guarded honestly, because Pharaoh had grasped with a merchant's whole heart that this particular captive walking down a gangway glowing with testimonials was worth more than any sum Slate could have carried. Until the Varatis' ransom arrived at a figure that made the crew's shares legendary in 3 ports, delivered through the grey coat, publicly, correctly, entered fair in every ledger. The most profitable catch in the Kestrel's history, concluded without one drop of blood, and if there was a moral in that, Sana let Pharaoh find it himself. He was young, there was time. The girl said one thing at the gangway, quietly, out of the family voice and in her own. You could have rowed off with 11. Your contract was the crew. I've seen the contract, I was the clerk, remember. It never mentions me. No, Sana agreed. It never did. Then why? Because of what my contract actually is, Sana said. It took me 26 years and one very bad morning to learn the wording. Go home the long way, child, ferry your boats, and settle your uncle in daylight in front of ledgers with witnesses. It's the only room he can't work in. The Varatis family's factor found Sana a month later in Greywick, with a purse that was not a fee but a fortune. Gratitude, the letter said, and future retainer, the letter also said, and Sana sent back the fortune and kept the standard fee for 11 ransomed sailors to the coin, and the refusal cost her a full evening of sitting alone with the sums of her old age, because she was 57 and the grey coat had no pension in it. But the arithmetic came out where it always came out now, since the morning on the Kestrel. The coat worked because the woman in it could not be bought, not by captains, not by principals, and not, hardest of all, by grateful houses whose retainer would make her, forever after, somebody's intermediary instead of the tables. One retainer, and every future captain across every future table would be right to wonder whose truth she carried. The fee was the coat. The refusal was the coat. She had spent 26 years thinking her famous rule was "I do not lie," and it had taken Slate's flat locksmith eyes to teach her the full wording at last. The table gets the whole truth, from a person who cannot be rented, and both halves cost, and both halves were the tool, and the tool was the only thing in the drowned world that let a small unarmed woman climb a pirate's side alone and row back down with lives. She was rowed out again inside the fortnight, a fishing family, 3 sons held off Neathis, a small fee, a small boat, the grey coat folded on her knees in the spray. It was the only coat in the world, as far as Santa knew, that got heavier the longer you kept it honest, and lighter every time you paid what that cost. She wore it up the side,